for the 2 o'clock service that we're going to go to after here. But he said, okay. So I told him I'll come for you for 10. And I got there late. And then we came late here. But he was ready before me. He was up and ready. He was eager to come. And that's what I love. I love that that he has that heart. Every time, he never gives up. And that's amazing. When I came to the door here, he still didn't even know where we were going. And then he didn't even know if we were going to a church. And he goes, where are we at? One of your customers' house? And I go, come in. And then he heard music and he goes, like he's looking around and he heard the music. I saw his eyes light up. And then he goes, I go, come, follow me, don't worry. I go, and then as we were walking up the stairs, I go, this is Pastor Elizabeth's church. And he goes, oh, really? So he came. So this is his first time here. And he was surprised. But I wanted to bring him here because a couple of reasons. Because he's been to Pastor Sonny's church, we've been there, but because really and truly, this church has been praying for him. We've been praying for him. And I knew that once he would come here, he would feel the presence of God and he'll be touched. And I'm praying for him all the time that he always gets this. He receives him and gets the deliverance for the full recovery that he needs. He's an important cousin to mine. He's a good friend, not just a cousin. And my testimony is a long testimony. But I'm trying to make it as short as possible. But I just want to read from the Word of God. I know a lot of you probably don't have the Bible here, but I'll just read it and you can just listen. And in 2 Timothy 1:8, in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 8 and 9, it says, be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of the Lord, nor of me, his prisoner, but be thou partakers of the affliction of the gospel according to the power of God. And then in Matthew 5:16, there's a few chapters. If you go to Matthew 5:16, it says, let your light so shine before man, that they may see the good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven. A lot of these scriptures you probably heard and remember, but this is all to do with your testimony and the love that God has put in you. It says in 1 John 5:11, it says, and this is the record that God has given us eternal life, and his life is in his Son. Again, it's the testimony. If we have, like what Pastor Roman said, are born again, you know, I got born again. I was born again. And I got born again and got saved at 19 years old. And I was young, a teenager. And I grew up in Ontario housing, in like, you almost would say it's almost like poverty. The lowest you can get in Ontario or Toronto. People have their kids and they just run out on the play area. The parents didn't even know where the kids are. And that's how it is in the projects. A lot of people are just wandering about, doing what they want to do. They're swearing, cursing at a young age, smoking cigarettes, smoking drugs. And these are all little kids. These are all little 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds. And in that Ontario housing, I got saved. And how I got saved is that there was a guy who came around to the Ontario housing projects, and he would gather up and he would feed us. And then he would share the word. And after he shared the word, he would pray for us. And then he kept doing this over and over. And I knew the time. It was Sunday, and instead of being in church, this is how his ministry was. And on Sunday, he would pick us up and go the same time every Sunday. And he'd do the same thing over and over. And maybe there was about 10 kids in that area. And, you know, he didn't ask us for $1. And you could tell he was a man of God, and he was sharing his love. And so when I saw this, it was kind of easier for me to give my life to God, because I wanted what that guy, I wanted what he had. And I saw the love in him, and he shared it with all of us. And that hunger just built up inside me. And I was so hungry for God. After, when he kept coming a bunch of times, he introduced me to another good friend of his. And he would drive me around in his van all over. We would go to New York, Florida, and I'd become part of his family. And he had a big heart. And he used to drive the church van for our church. And then I started going out to the church that he was going to. And I would help him. He would drive the van, I'd be the door person. I'd be helping people get in the van and letting them out. And that was our ministry, that's what we did. Then he introduced me to another guy his name was Paul. Then he introduced me to another guy named Jimmy. He did the same kind of service, but he came all the way down from Kitchener, and he would drive down, and he would come down to every Sunday, drive in the van over and over, and do the same kind of thing. He would come, feed us, minister to us. And this guy's preaching was more on faith. He was a faith preacher. And his ministry was more, and his teachings were more on faith. Everything to do with faith is all he talked about. And he didn't talk about love, because he didn't have to talk about love. You can see the love in him, just by his actions, by what he's doing. And none of these guys ever asked me for $1, or any of the kids or teenagers for money. They just did it out of the love of God. And a lot of those people who were in there got saved in that group. I lost contact with most of all of them. But in that, I got saved at 19. And I was so hungry for God. And I had the zeal. And I saw many miracles. I saw many things. And I just truly loved God. I was filled, and I kept being overfilled and overfilled with God's love. And I was always in the Word. When it came to praying, I could pray and fast. I would lose track of the days, of how many days it was, because it wasn't to me about how long. It was just about how much I can get. I couldn't get enough. And then I did that for 6 years, 7 years. I met Sonny. I met a lot of people who were at the church I am now. And then it all came crashing down, because I was going after the roots of all evil. I was going after the love of all evil, which is money. I was going after money, drugs, everything. You think about it, women, everything. And in my life, I couldn't believe that. See, when you start slowly going away from God, and you don't realize how far you're gone, until you're actually too far gone. And then, so I was doing the same things I was doing over and over again. I didn't know if I would be successful at what I was doing, but I was happy at that time. And then I started making a lot of money, and I started becoming more happy. But through all that time when I was making the money I was making and the lifestyle I had, I was hurting a lot of people around me. I was hurting everybody. I was taken from them. I was taken from my own family. I was taken from anybody who I can get my hands on. I would take, and I would figure out a way to take. And that's what I was doing. And I couldn't believe I was happy in doing that. And that's not what God called me out to do. But I thought this was my purpose now. Because you know when you get so high in a place that you just feel like this is what life is. And I thank God for the time when I got saved at 19 years old. Because that was always rooted, embedded in me. Even though I was drifted far away and I was so lost. But yet, I was still, God had saw me there. I was found. And it was like, I was doing those same things I was doing over and over again. And through those things, I encountered miracles and I saw God's hand work in my life. It was so powerful that I saw that all these different things that were happening. And at the time when this happened, I still didn't realize it was God that was doing that, that was pulling me out. When I was going in situations where I can tell you, my testimony, I don't want you to look at me and judge me by what I'm going to tell you these things, but I want you to know that the lifestyle I had before, it's the same cousin that you saw right there, Dougie. We grew up together. We were close friends, and we were like brothers. And then all of a sudden, after we started chasing money, I started getting into the drugs. And then into the drugs, I started figuring out ways to make money into the drugs. And I would sell the drugs to anybody who I could see, anybody. I didn't care how old, how young, who they were. And the same person who I was selling drugs to was my same cousin. The same person who I was sharing my love with. And I always thought in my mind that I'm the cause of his drug addictions. Because every time he came around me, he knew he can get anything he wanted from me. And I would just give it to him. And then I would use him and his friends and everybody around them. And then it got to a point where I was using everybody. And I was making a lot of money doing it. But through that, there was always risk involved. And then through that, I started going into, I opened up one adult entertainment business, and then I ended up having 5 locations. And I was making a lot of money. I was making about $4,000 a day, cash. So that's about $1.5 million a year. I was making a lot of money. And through making all this money, I never once tried to help any of my family members. I didn't care about anybody, just cared about my lifestyle and me. And through this, I was robbed 4 times at gunpoint and in my own establishment, because they would always come in the night, and it was always sometimes inside jobs, or they just would knew I would go pick up the money and leave. And through the times when I was robbed at gunpoint, one time I was knocked out unconscious, and I woke up, I didn't even know where I was. All I saw was I was getting stitches in my head. And, you know, it happened more and more times. And then after that, through that, I was starting to get into more of the drugs and trying to sell the drugs. And through that, I started going into, there's been times where I had been like a bike gang group set up an ambush to buy drugs from me, and I was supposed to sell it. And so they set up this ambush, and I didn't know I was going to an ambush. What happened was I had 2 friends of mine, and I'm always around people and friends, and 2 friends of mine were there with me. I went to pick them up, and then the friend said he's going to bring his dog. I said, no, I don't want to. He had a big dog, a Rottweiler dog. And I said, I don't want a dog. It's like the car's so small. I had a little car. So low key, so low profile. And that's why people didn't know who I was or what I was doing, because I was low key. That's how the enemy comes. He comes low key, and we don't realize when the enemy's in front of you. So when I was there, and the dog was there coming with the dog, this dog all of a sudden started barking. We went into this area, we went behind the building, and then the dog started barking. And when this dog started barking, we all got paranoid, looked around. And then I had my car running. And then all of a sudden, the dog started barking louder. And then my friend started screaming and all that. Because what happened was, they had trucks and they had people that were all in the bushes, all in this area, that were coming to ambush us in this one little car and then set up this. And when they heard this dog barking, when we heard the dog barking, I just drove. So I didn't realize this God was speaking to me at the time. And God was in control and saying, yes, this dog had to come. Because in my flesh, I didn't want it. I didn't want the dog to be there. And then when this dog had barked, then God said, step on the gas. I stepped on the gas. All of a sudden, I saw this pickup truck come in to block me from going the way. It was only one way in and one way out, to block the entrance I came in. Then the pickup truck stalled. And then it started, and then it stalled. The only way I was able to get through that is to go over the pylon and hit the pylon and go over half of the pylon. I thought my car would get stuck in the pylon, but the car went over the pylon and it went over, and I kind of it's like flying over, but yet I still had full control of the car. And I'm telling you, these guys were screaming. We were screaming with scared at first, and then screaming with excitement that we were able to make that out. And then we had to go down this long alleyway to get back onto the main road. And it was all, they had set it up that there was pylons all around, and there was only one way into that area and one way to come out and go down the alleyway. So their plan had failed to set myself up and the buddies who I went with. That was one time when as we were driving, these guys all came down in their motorcycles and their bikes and their cars, and they were chasing us down the 404 highway in the middle of broad daylight. And these guys were screaming and yelling, and then finally they just drove off. They wanted to show their bike gang collar, their names on their back of their jackets, so we see who they are. So we get intimidated that they're out for us. And so when that happened, they were so amazed at how we escaped that. I said, that was only God. And they said they couldn't believe it. These guys were not Christians. These guys are like biker guys. These guys are like hardcore biker guys. These not your typical normal people who I was hanging around with. You have to remember that, right? So that was the lifestyle I was in when I came from being saved at 19, going through all this. And there's another time when I was working at a hotel, and I was selling drugs through the hotel. And I was using that as a way to sell to people. And the guy who got me the job, who was the head of the hotel owner, was more of a mafia kind of guy. He had owned strip joints and adult entertainment businesses. And when he owned these businesses, he was in control of that whole area, and you could not allow to do that in his property. And somehow somebody ratted it out. So they came with these big guys, and they had baseball bats in their hands, and they were banging it on their hands, and they were tapping my knees. And you know, like that intimidation was right there. I go, like in my mind, I'm like, God, is this the time? And then, so it was just like a warning. But you know, when you're stubborn, you keep doing it. So I kept doing it. And I got good at it. Everything I was doing, I was getting good at. Because if I wasn't, I wouldn't be making the money I was making. And I wouldn't be here today. That's how I was looking at it, thinking that it was all me. And then when I realized that one time I picked up a friend of mine, and I used to hang around this house, and all this house did was they did drugs. They sold it and they did it. And it was like a drug house. And I was part of that house. And then when I went I brought the one guy that was there over to the hotel, and we were supposed to do a transaction. And then all of a sudden, you know, God said, don't get out of the car. So I stood there and I waited and I waited. I didn't get out. I didn't have my windows. I rolled my windows up, locked my doors. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, bats in the people running at my car, swinging bats, trying to break the window. It didn't break. This is the same car that I had when I escaped with that setup. The same little car. It's a little Honda Civic, a hatchback. I bought it for $800 and it lasted, and I couldn't believe it. This car, it drove from all the way from Yonge and Elgin Mills. And I was on such like a fraction of gas. I didn't even think smart to get gas, because that's how I always run on empty. That's the type of person I am. Then so we drove away. Then next thing you know, we saw these cars coming out and they were chasing us down the street. And I'm going to make this story short because I want to get to my main testimony of how I got to where I am now. So when these cars were chasing us down, I said to myself, I'm going to run out of gas. I said, this is it for sure. Because it was 3 cars. And it was like undercover cars. At first I thought they were cops. And then I said, no, they can't be. They would put sirens on and pull us over. They wouldn't chase us out like that. And I said, that's part of the hotel. That was a setup. Because that was a warning I got the first time. I didn't see through that warning. So then so they're chasing us down. All that came to my head was, this car's going to run out of gas, and I'm going to have to run for my life. I'm going to have to ditch it and run for my life. And I said, maybe cops will come. Maybe cops will come and see that we're being chased in the middle of daylight again. But then I said in my mind that, but Mike, you have all these drugs in your car. You can't have cops pull you over and say, oh yeah, you've been chased. So I tell my friend, when we get to the side street, start throwing all the drugs out. I'm like, he goes, are you sure? I go, yeah, just start throwing them out. And then he goes, so I said, what's your buddy's number again? You know, the house that we always go and hang out at? He goes, oh, okay. I go, call him right now and say, we're going to go meet him there, and to help us to set up some kind of protection plan that we're going to come in and they're going to stop these guys from following us if they get to that point, if they don't give up. So it got to the point where we started slowing down, and the guy who was beside me, he's got scared for his life, and he said, get out. And he goes, let me out, let me out. He didn't want to fulfill and go through that plan. He saw his own plan. So then he got out of the car. I pulled over, he got out. The other 2 cars stopped, and they chased him down. They beat him. He was in the hospital. He had life-threatening injuries in the hospital. And how I know is because we all, at the end of the story, we all found out. So I drove, and I called the same guy, and I said to him, look, these guys are chasing me. They're not giving up. He said, okay, pull down my street. I pulled down his street, and then these guys got closer to me. They sideswiped my car. But my buddy came. I didn't know that he had like 10 cars of people waiting just for me. Just one phone call. And he drove these cars down, and he blocked them off, and then they hit his car, and then they drove around, and then it was like something out of a movie. I never would imagine that this is the style this is the lifestyle I was in. Why am I in this lifestyle? So they would block the car over. They jumped out on the cars, and they all stood in a line. And those guys came with their little 3 cars, but they were big cars, and they all stood. And these guys were big guys. They were bigger than my friends. My friends were big guys, but not like them. And they were going to go at it. And I was like, and they just turned around and said, Mike, this is a warning. This is your last warning. That point on, I went on vacation for a month. I wanted to change my life around. But I didn't change my life around. So I started still doing the things I was doing, and I stopped the drugs completely. I didn't care if it made me $1 or millions. I didn't care. And I stayed in the adulting business. And temptation was always around me, always. Everywhere I turned, it was always there. But I didn't give in to those certain temptations. And a lot of people asked me how I'm doing it. And there were guys that were in the same kind of business. And I said, I just treat it like a business. I don't treat it like it's a party house. And so everything I did, I looked at it as a different view. And through that, I got so much, I made so much money, but then I lost so much money. And then, so I had all the businesses I had, I sold them all, and I kept one. And before I sold the last businesses, why I came to a point to sell these businesses was because the police started cracking down. The city started cracking down on me. And then they said, okay, if I close down all these businesses, they won't charge me. And these were all criminal charges, like 2 pages long. I would be in jail for who knows how long. So I said, you know what? It's not worth it. I'll close them down. But before I closed them down, one of the cops, he was out for me. And he was out for me from the very beginning. And what he did was, he called Revenue Canada on me. And when he called Revenue Canada on me, he said they were checking to see how much money I was claiming and making. And they did a full audit, and they checked all my records for everything. And they did a complete full audit. I had to hire tax lawyers, I had to hire tax accountants, everything to get me out of this mess. And they said that I didn't realize how much they were claiming. At first it became 1 million. First it was 150,000. I go, oh, okay. And they go, no, that's just the GST. I go, GST? So what are you trying to tell me? He goes, well, that's GST from what you made over those 4 or 5 years that we're claiming you made, because we did all the audits of all your Visa cards, all your credit cards, all your line of credits, all your mortgages, everything. There's no way you can be living off what you're saying you're making. So we claim that you're making, so we're doing assessment, this is what you were saying you're making. Because of your lifestyle, you have to be making this amount of money. So you are owing us in taxes $1 million, 1.2 million, and 150,000 in GST, 1.2 million in HST. And I was crying. So you have to remember the story. When I was making all this money, I was blowing a lot of money because of the lifestyle. So it's not like I had $1 million stashed away that could pay this off. And even my assets at this time couldn't cover everything. And so I sold my one house. I said, take my house. So they took it. But it didn't cover the debts. It only covered a portion. So they still came after me. They didn't give up. And this has been going on for the last, I'd say 12 years. And these last 12 years, when I was getting to going through all this, there's been times where I wanted to give up my life. There's been times where I wanted to just give up. So, you see, God has a plan for each and every one of us. And what his plan is that no man or person or anything can change that plan. When he has a plan, he's in control, he will see that you get to the place he wants you to be, and he puts you back on that road. So you see, I didn't come to God because I owe that kind of money. Sorry about this. I surrendered my whole self. I met my wife Cher, and she wasn't a Christian at the time, but she had the love of a Christian person. She had the desire. And when I met her, I had one place, one spot, and I still held on to the one because it was in Toronto, and all these other places were in Vaughan. When I held on to this one place, she was always telling me to get rid of it. And the name was called Temptation. And it even had fire flames on the front, on the sign. Like, that you're in like hell. And you know, like, I was so blinded. I was like, I designed that sign? I named the name that? But you get so caught up in the things that you're doing that, you know, you don't realize where you are. And then you just think to myself that, how can I get to this place where I was before to now? Look at all the times God saved me. Look at all the miracles that God did. And there's many more, but I just don't have the time to go through all of them. But I just said to myself that, you know, there has to be something else. And I said that when my wife Sharon was talking to me over and over, and we had Aliyah, we were living in her parents' basement. I started getting into construction. And then her father was like the light of my world. Because her father, his name is Zach. What happened was, we became good friends, and then he treated me like his own son, and he brought me into his home, and he gave me everything. But the most important thing is, I started working, he just retired, and he wanted to make extra money. And so I was good at doing the construction business. And so we formed the construction company together, the two of us. And every single day I got up, got into his truck, he had the truck running. We go together. He would start from the time we started the truck until the time we get to the job site, and some were close and some were far, sharing the Word of God to me. He would be sharing and sharing and sharing. And you know, at that point in my life, I was like, I don't want to hear it. I was just trying to, if there was some way I could control him to shut him off, I would. I was trying to turn the music up. I was trying to put my head out the window. I was trying to do everything so I couldn't hear him. But what happened was, he was planting the seed, which I didn't know. And he was telling me the Word of God and the Word of God. And then I got to the point where it was going into my mind and into my heart. And then, you know, I started coming out to church with him. He invited me out one time, Global Kingdom. And then I went a couple of times, it was okay. But then, after he kept telling me the Word and we were doing business together, and I had no way to get away from this but hear the Word every day, then I met Sonny, the pastor of the church I go to now, at the bank. And Sonny and I were best friends. When I got saved at 19, we were best friends for all those 6 years. We were living together, we were roommates. And then after that is when I stopped talking to him. And then when I met him at the bank, he said, Mike, we hugged, we shook hands, we were so happy to see each other. But he was trying to leave his number at one of my businesses in Toronto, but I never ever called him. Because see, when your heart is hardened, you don't want to hear anything about, be around God's people or hear the Word of God. So when I met him in the bank, my heart was still kind of hardened. And then he kept pushing me to come. And then it took about a good year. And then I was going through a whole bunch of stuff. After I met him, I was going through all these things. And it was all like, I was getting visions. I was going through, everything was like, God was just putting everything together. And I was seeing everything come to place over and over and over again. I said, pray for me, pray for me. But he thought I was joking because I kept saying that to him all the time. And then every time I tell him that. And then finally, I said to Zach and Cher's mother and father and Cher, just go to the church. Just go one time. Because every time on Sunday we would go shopping, we would put everything in front of God and not go to church. So we went. And I went there one time, and that's when I surrendered my heart to God. And I got re-saved. That was only 9 months ago, not even a year. After I got saved then, I've never missed the Sunday. I did actually when I went on trips and that. But in my heart, what I've learned now because I prayed to God and I asked God, those 20 years of me not knowing you, and why did I walk down that path? I said to God, I said, this is where you wanted me to be. And now I see what you're trying to do. That your hand was always there. Everything I was going through, you always were there. I turned my back on you, but you didn't turn your back on me. You were always there to see me through. And that's how I know I was supposed to be where I am today. When I gave my life back to God, and I would go on my knees and cry, and I would say, Father, those 20 years I can't get back. I said, if there's any way you can give me back what I lost those 20 years, if you can give it to me now, I would take it. So that's why I've been into God's Word ever since. And next week, I'm being ordained as a minister to get my pastor license. And back to this miracle that Pastor Roman wanted me to tell you, is that 1 million, 0.2 million ended up becoming 2.5 million that I owe. And I was going to Sonny's church, and I was asking them, I didn't want to tell no one about it, because I had too much pride in me. I didn't want too much shame. You see, the old lifestyle, it haunted me. It came back to me. And it wasn't bikers that were chasing me. It wasn't gangs. It wasn't police. It was now the government. And they wanted to take everything I had. Everything. And they didn't care. And it cost me so much money in lawyers. And, I came here and I was telling Pastor Roman and Pastor Elizabeth my situation. I opened up. You guys heard about some of the story, at the end of the story, but you didn't hear of how I got to that story. That's how I got to this point. And then at this point, when I was coming here, telling you guys about, I was trying to get refinancing a mortgage and all that. There was no way I was getting a refinance or mortgage, because they put that on my file, and my credit bureau and my file and everything. They did my last property I had here on Egerton, which was at the same spot. They had the mortgage company denied my mortgage, had turned the place into a power sale, and were closing it down and kicking me out. And they didn't care. But, through the prayers of everybody, and through what God wanted to do, He brought me through it. I didn't see there's a way through that. And how He did is, He put me through with the right people, the right lawyers, the right people. So what happened was, one of my customers who I knew really well, I told them to, can you buy this place from me before it goes into power sale? And I approached different people to ask, and they had property and they had money, but I told them the story. It sounded good, but then it started getting risky, and they said no. And then I was at the last straw. I didn't know what to do, so they called me back, and they said, we'll do it. Let's do it. And so they got their lawyer. I got my lawyer, and we put the transaction together. I got a real estate agent and everything. They put on the market and they bid the highest because they really wanted it, and they bought the place. And today they bought it, it's theirs. When through this, I had 5 liens on the property, and the 5 liens on the property were all like big liens. One was 2.5 million, one was 150,000, one was 50,000, one was 10,000, one was like, it was just crazy. And I said, there's no way they could all get paid out, because I'm only selling them the place for 400,000. So how are they going to get everybody to get their money? So the lawyers and all that were fighting everybody. And through the lawyers, I kept telling them that you do your work and I'll do the praying. You guys, you do what you're good at, I'll do what I'm good at. You do that, I said, you're going to see God's hand work through this. You're going to see a miracle come out of this. And everything they told me, they double guessed it. They said, no, they're not going to do that. This is not going to happen. They won't do that. I said, every single person I owe those liens to, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go down to the lowest price and offer them the lowest price. And I said, they'll accept it. They go, no, they're not going to accept it. They're going to laugh at that. It's too low. Every single person, including the government, accepted the offers so that the deal can close. And not only that, but the lawyer sent an email to me, not supposed to send it to me. He's supposed to send it to his other colleague, another lawyer. He said, there's no way that the government is going to walk away from that kind of money, and they're going to put a writ on him and this check and do a writ check. So the next day they do it and all that, and they come back and they go, there's no writs, there's no information, nothing. And the guy goes, like, he doesn't understand. And then they go, the people who were buying it wanted to know if this $2.5 million lien is going to chase them. And then they said, so that we had to get it all documented from lawyers. And their Revenue Canada agent and their supervisor was not given there's the same verbally, they weren't given in writing. And two, went back in prayer again. And then they offered everything we asked, they accepted. Even Revenue Canada accepted the lower offer to make the deal close, and all the shortfalls that I had to pay out to everybody was paid. Out of my own pocket, I had to pay extra $6,000 in. But it was $6,000 compared to $2.5 million owing. I mean, when I look at it and I say, man, I got my life back. I'm marrying my wife next year. A full marriage. You guys are all invited because I have invitations for this whole church and the other church I go to. God is just doing amazing work. And I see that, and I just want everyone to know that. My testimony wasn't supposed to be this long, but I just felt bad if I didn't tell you how I got from the beginning to where I am now. So you see what I went through. And my cousin doesn't even know all these things I went through, only partial, because I would just tell it here and there. But it's been an amazing journey. And God put me back now. And I kid you not, in the 9 months I came back as a Christian, the knowledge and the wisdom that God gave me through His Word is amazing, and I'm just so blessed because I asked for that. I couldn't get back those 20 years, but I asked for that. And 1,000 days is like one day to God. So whatever we think, God is not in control, He's in control. And He will pull you through, and He'll see you through, because He brought everybody together. Even though they weren't Christians, everybody together. And if you see all the emails and the texts and back and forth, they only said, thank God. Before they were talking, it was them. Now they came at the end and thank God. So it's amazing what God is doing. I'm so thankful that He has pulled me through this, and I'm so thankful that you can hear this testimony. And I hope it's touched you and blessed you. And I hope you look at me as the new person, not the old person, because I went through that and I feel shameful and all that. But I know God pulled me through that to get me to where I am now. And those are all learning experiences. And I can talk to somebody who's been in this situation. And I know their infirmities because Jesus knows ours. And I feel them. And my cousin alone here, I keep bringing him out. And I see the big change in his life. And I see he called me, I didn't call him. And he's here today. And I just thank God for everything. We serve an amazing God, a great God, a loving God. And He loves us more than we love Him. So God bless you all.